Almost all of us in this room, if we are from how many are from the United States? The majority. And I'm going to put a guess out there to say that the majority of you are Christian. That's not substantive, it's accidental. If you were born in India, you would be Hindu. If you were born in Saudi Arabia, you would be Muslim. If you were born in Thailand, you would probably be Buddhist. And if you were born in China, you would probably be atheist. Almost all of what we believe about God and our relationship with God is a reflection of our environment. It is a reflection of the people, place, and a time. If you remember nothing else of what I say during this lecture series, I hope this remains with you. That religion, our relationship with religion, is a reflection of a people, place, and a time. What do I mean by that? You change any one variable, and you will change the course of that religion. For those of you who are Christian here, you might be surprised to know that in the United States alone, there is 240 different denominations of Christianity. So when we talk about a singular truth, there's no such thing as a singular truth. You would be even more surprised to learn that worldwide, there are 45,000 denominations of Christianity. Why? Because when Christianity bridges from one culture or people to another time, it changes. It changes as in a process called syncretism. Syncretism is when we blend cultural beliefs with the religion, and that's what happens in every religion around the world. There's no such thing as a single pure religion. Religion is a course in change itself. It is a reflection of the people, place, and the time in which it is born, in which it lives, and in which it dies. And that is what I hope remains with you throughout this lecture series. As we learn about the very different peoples around the world, I'd love for you to be able to think about how these religions came to be, how they are, and how they will continue to change. And one important thing is once we write something down, in any religion, in any faith, once we write something down, we have basically condemned it to death. Religion must constantly be in change to be alive. We must change to be alive. And when we stop changing, what happens to us? We die. And the same thing happens with religion. And that's the beauty of religion. It's a reflection of who we are and our experiences in this place and time. This lecture series, particularly this lecture, is going to focus on the American experience of religion. The American experience is unique to any other culture in the world. Our nation was founded on the ideal of freedom, and the USA is remarkable for its unique role in spawning religious movements. People came to the United States because they felt threatened by where they came from because of their religious beliefs. And they came here with the idea of being able to practice their religious beliefs freely in this new land. Our convergent commitment to religious freedom stems from the diversity of our many faith traditions. The rebellious attitudes prevalent from frontier settlements basically started all of the evangelical movements that we know in the United States today. To help you understand how we came about some of our beliefs, African slaves introduced Islam to the United States. The push to Christianize slaves led to the development of New Orleans Voodoo. And the drive to abolish slavery was led largely by Christian preachers. We can't begin to tell the story of America without telling the story of religion. And we can't answer questions about the importance of religion today without knowing how religion developed in the United States. We are a secular nation, but there's a question mark behind that, because there's a large group of people who would like not to have the United States be a secular nation anymore. But the United States is a secular nation, mandating a formal separation between state and religious entities. American society is underpinned by religious freedom. It's the idea that the government should not favor any one single form of religion over another. The First Amendment states, Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. Despite strong cultural leanings towards Christianity, there's a strong pluralist belief that Americans want diverse religious practices in the United States. This is an important consideration for us to think about today. That as long as these faiths do not pose a threat to the American way of life, should we allow room for all faiths? Or should one faith be allowed to diminish all others? The United States is diverse, yet homogeneous. While the United States is religiously diverse, the American national identity is strongly Christian. We think about ourselves as a Christian nation. We say, God bless America, and in God we trust. As a matter of fact, in the 1950s, the words pledge allegiance to the flag and to one God, this was added due to the threat of communism in our world. This wasn't in the original Pledge of Allegiance. And so now we are seeing again this resurgence of Christian nationalism, and it begs us to ask some questions about who we are and what do we want to be our national identity. Americans are somewhat diverse in their religious makeup, but as you can see, predominantly Christian. You'll see here that Christianity is almost 71%, with unaffiliated religious people being at about 22 to 23%. Jews are 1.9, Muslim almost 1%, Buddhist almost 1%, and Hindu almost 1%. So we are a strongly Christian nation, but there is and must be diversity and pluralism. Religious diversity has been a prominent feature of the religious landscape since even before the colonial period. There was also great diversity among the churches during the colonial period. This religious freedom allowed numerous Christian sects, communities, and movements to flourish during the early colonial days. America's religious diversity is also a product of immigration. As different people from different walks of life and different backgrounds and at different times come to our shores, it changes and helps us understand better the diversity of religions throughout the world. Waves of immigrants persecuted for their religious beliefs at home came to our shores for a different life, and they still do even today. There are many atheists and agnostics in the United States as well. These account for the religiously unaffiliated, and they also contribute to the pluralism and diversity of the religious landscape in the United States. According to the Public Religion Research Institute, the number of religiously unaffiliated, including atheists, has tripled since the early 1990s, accounting for just about 23% of the total population. Approximately 10% of Americans today identify as atheists. What has driven this increase in atheism and agnosticism? I will share one factor alone: education. This may come as a surprise and maybe even upset some of you. But As a population increases the quality of its education, it conversely reduces its reliance and desire for religion. Today also, in the United States, we're seeing more and more people exposed to diverse perspectives through multicultural societies, particularly through the internet. This idea of being able to see what many of us growing up were unable to see. Most of us, when we grew up, we believed the same things or very similarly to what our parents believed. And they believed what their parents believed. And so on, and so on, and so on. We reflect the environment into which we are born. And if we're unable to travel, or if there's no other external forces that are feeding us information or helping us see a different perspective, we will maintain that view for our entire lifetime. Today, the internet allows us to see in real time what is happening around the world in ways that we could have never imagined when we were children. Millennials and Generation Z are the most racially, ethnically, and religiously diverse generation in American history. Continued growth of atheism and agnosticism in the USA is expected, and it's going to continue to follow the same course as it has happened in Europe. This is a matter of history, it's a matter of change, it's almost a matter of inevitability. Before we talk about the many religious sects and denominations in the United States, I'd like to address the Native American First Peoples. Their religious background is intriguing, and it's one that I love to speak about because I love speaking about Native mythologies and cultures around the world. And we are really fortunate in the United States to have a tremendous diversity of cultures and religious backgrounds in the United States. But these are peoples that have been plagued and persecuted by 500 years of loss, of destruction, of decimation. They have been subjugated, and this has taken its toll on Native peoples. Most of the Native ceremonies that were alive just 300 years ago are now gone. Small daily rituals and ceremonies, vocabularies and grammars that were embedded in these traditional cultures are now gone for good. Native American people often will tell you that their traditional ways are not religion. It's a way of life. Religion, in fact, in these native languages, is almost impossible to interpret into English. Western religious tradition is derived from a supernatural authority, something that transcends. We as Christians or Jews or Muslims believe that there is a transcendent being and that we derive our morality and our values from this transcendent being. Through Christians, it is through the work and the words of Jesus Christ, his teachings. For Muslims, it's from the teachings from Muhammad, who received these messages directly from the Archangel Gabriel. The word Quran means the recitation, because he was receiving these words directly from the Archangel Gabriel, who was speaking the words from God. All of these religions come to us through a transcendent being. But here, we see a very different story. In most indigenous worldviews, most native peoples, there's no such duality that includes a transcendent being and a human element that receives as a vessel. Plants and animals and mountains and stones carry and embody divinity. This isn't to say that God is immanent in all things. This isn't a type of animism, which is a type of religious belief in which God is in these things. No, they don't believe that God is in these things. They believe that God is these things. God isn't in the thunder. God isn't in the ocean. God is the thunder. God is the ocean. And so now when we look at these and we try to understand these people, we can see that nature itself is their God. And that is how they understand the world. And that is why when you see natives and you see them in their respect for nature, you can understand clearly that what they're doing is not just respecting nature, they are paying tribute and homage to God. Instead of a dual world of sacred and profane, indigenous peoples almost always conceive of only sacred and more sacred. There isn't anything that's profane. There isn't anything that's bad. It's simply sacred and more sacred. The Spirit moves and is in all things. Religion is the relationship between living humans and other persons or things. Let that sink in for a second. For almost all of us, religion for us is our relationship with a transcendent God. For the native people, particularly Native Americans, religion is their relationship with other human beings and with nature itself. These may include departed as well as yet to be born human beings in the so-called natural world, plants and animals, mountains, springs, lakes, and clouds. These are all manifestations and the presence of God. There are diverse beliefs even across territories. It's impossible to determine exactly how many religious beliefs and faiths existed in North America prior to colonization. But there are said to have been some 300 different languages broken into some 30 to 50 language categories. There is some great diversity among the traditions. The Iroquois speak about the Creator's original instruction. Now, we don't know if these are original Iroquois stories or if these were somehow tainted by the colonial beliefs in Christianity. The latter is probably likely, but it still gives us some idea of the syncretism that was happening, the melding of these beliefs. So we see this, and then we talk about the Athabascan people in Alaska. And this is the Koyukon universe, and this is a decentralized universe. And matter of fact, here we see the raven is created with the creation of human beings. And it's only one of many different powerful beings in the Koyukon world. And he exhibits not just perfection or strength. He exhibits weaknesses as well. And this is an important thing to consider, that we learn from not only the good, but also from the mistakes. We'll see the same as we travel to Polynesia, and I talk to you about the demigod Maui. Maui was a troublemaker like Loki of the Norse gods. And we'll see through Maui the same sorts of stories, that we learn the lessons from Maui, not because he did things well, but he often messed up in a great and terrible way. And he learned his lesson, and he learned those lessons to teach us these lessons. This model is more reminiscent of the Greek gods, that there aren't just good gods. There are also bad gods, and the good gods even have good and bad traits. They were human in all ways, except they could live and be immortal. One size in these native faiths does not fit all. There's no such thing as a generic Native American religion. And when we try to understand all native faiths as one, as it does with most things, when we try to pin all people into one category or one grouping, we tend to oversimplify, and that leads to distortion. In the Native American experience, religious practices are often localized and specific to a place. So again, when we talk about a people, a place, and a time, this is important to understand. For example, in my state of Wisconsin, the Menominee people, they believe that the great bear was born out of the Menominee River. And when he came out of the great Menominee River, he met at the end of the river the eagle. And he asked the eagle to be his brother so that they could join together in nature as hunters, but also to create a society. And now the Menominee create these stories from these great creatures. We'll see the same types of stories when we get to Australia, and you'll see the Aboriginal people with the stories of the great kangaroo and the great iguana, and you'll see these beautiful stories of creation talking not about a transcendent being, but about the animals that they saw every single day. And so the stories of the creation story is localized to that small area where that bear existed and their experience of that particular eagle. But that was their world, and so their creation story is different. The importance of place is revealed in the beliefs because geography helps us understand origin. Many cultures are not focused, particularly native cultures, are not focused on belief. There's not a lot of dogma here as you look to the Catholic Church, which has football fields of dogma written in books, right? If you need an answer for something, just go to the Vatican. They have an answer for every question you might have, regardless of relevance. Thanks for that. And I get to say that because after 8 years in the seminary, I feel like I've paid the price. But participation is what's important here. They want people to show up. They want people to participate. So these ideas of whether or not you believe something or everyone agrees or believes in the same thing, it doesn't matter. Are you participating? Are you supporting your community? Are you teaching the children? Are you listening with open ears and open minds and open hearts to the elders? These are the things that matter. Working in the community, you'll see this here, the sharing of the breath. You'll see this when we approach New Zealand. This is called the hongi. And this is when they press their foreheads together and their noses together. You'll see this across many native tribes. But this is the idea that we all breathe the same air. And that together we're sharing the same thought, we're breathing the same air, and we are joined together in that moment, breathing the same air. Cooperation with and devotion to a larger kin group is essential to Native American communities. Teaching proper behavior is important. How do we act? Think how we have become distorted in our society. We will unfriend someone who disagrees with us, despite the fact that this person might have been a dear friend who's helped us out of so many great things in the past. And we might agree with them on many other things, but one thing now separates us as no longer being able to be friends. Here, it's not about what you believe as much as how you act and how we treat each other. Generosity is the mainstay of these communities. This is what defines participation. And generosity is a religious act as well as a social one. Here you will see a potlatch ceremony. And a potlatch ceremony in Alaska or in Canada is where the tribes will actually get together and they'll have this huge party, and one chieftain will do his best to give away all of his wealth. There will be tens of thousands of dollars worth of rifles, of ammunition, of supplies that will be given away, and they'll invite the other tribes. And then there isn't a question about whether they will be invited back to the next party, because next month they're going to get invited to another party and they will be on the receiving end. In our society, wealth is measured by how much we have. In Native societies, wealth is often measured by how much you give away. Oral traditions are what sustain these communities for centuries. They have been passed down from generation to generation, teaching skills and jokes. They would gather together for ceremonial events, and the main focus of these wasn't religious. It was to get together and to share stories, to remember those who have passed, and most importantly, to laugh. Significant achievements are often done through ceremonies. We've lost much of that today in our society, the idea of belonging and ceremonies and rituals. Native cultures understood the importance of these rituals and these ceremonies that helped mark important rites of passage. One of the more important passages, certainly the last one, is death, which is seen not as an ending, but as a transition. Many Native communities see human beings as complex beings with different kinds of essences or anima or breaths, and that at the moment of death, they undergo different outcomes. It is believed that after death, some of these essences may be harmful for living people to be around, and so there must be a ceremony for protection for the rest of us at a person's death. Through it all, there is the constancy of change. Religions continue to evolve and change to syncretize. There's no such thing as a golden age of native religions when they all believed the same thing and there was peace. There's been constancy of change, and that's important. Change, borrowing, and innovation are the characteristics of any living religion. Whatever religious background you come from, we could have a conversation about the changes of that religion that have come to the point where you now know that faith. And you would be surprised at just how much change has happened in your own religion over hundreds or even thousands of years. Natives, their religions were changed, and the changes that happened to them on a large scale were unprecedented and mostly destructive at our hands. Whole languages, ceremonies, and narratives are all gone. In one native community, there was a snake dance that became extinct. But the elder of that tribe said, we shouldn't be worried about losing this snake dance. He said if it was lost, it was because we didn't need it anymore. If we really need it back, the snakes will teach it to us again, because it was them who taught it to us in the first place. And so it is with truth. When we think that we lose something, we have to ask ourselves if what we've lost is essential, or if it's still in the process of evolving to a different truth. Many Native Americans were converted to Christianity. Some were enforced with dire penalties for refusal, and some believed because they believed in the missionaries and the kindness of the missionaries who came to help them. For many Native peoples, conversion was a practical means of survival. They understood that if they didn't accept Christian conversion, that life would be very difficult for them. But what happened is they started to change their beliefs to meld with Christianity, and then they changed Christianity also to meld with their beliefs. And if you get a chance to go to Christian ceremonies and reservations or native peoples throughout the United States, you will see how these ceremonies have changed over the years and how they implement many of their cultural norms and mores. Traditional language and symbolism has been incorporated now into Christian worship as well. They believe that with the value, knowledge, and native traditions that they can continue to survive, change, adapt, and regain what they have lost. The key issues for the survival of native traditions include control of native sites, preservation of Native American languages, return of sacred artifacts, and the maintenance of integrity of the religious knowledge and values. And now I'm going to shock some of you. We're going to get into Thomas Jefferson, one of our founding fathers. Did you know that Thomas Jefferson struggled with Christianity? He was a Christian, but he struggled deeply with Christianity, with the ideals of the Enlightenment. His idea was to edit the Bible literally, and he did it. Because he was a smart man, he worked in the 4 languages familiar to him: English, French, Greek, and Latin. Jefferson went through several copies of the New Testament and, using a penknife, actually cut out sections that he agreed with and found useful, and then glued them together in a 4-column book, 1 column for each language. You can actually get this book today. It's called the New Testament, The Life and Morals of Jesus of Nazareth. And if you want to see it in person, you can actually go to the Smithsonian and see it. With his rendering, Jefferson offered a New Testament narrative that he found preferable to the original. Jefferson saw Jesus as a moral exemplar and a teacher, not the Son of God. Jefferson did not find the stories about miracles or the supernatural relevant, which he believed were added later to the original scriptural texts. many modern-day scriptural historians generally agree with Jefferson. Today, theologians and scriptural historians will tell you that almost all of the religious miracles that happened and are attributed to Jesus were added to much later versions of the New Testament scriptures. And why? Because they needed to believe that Jesus, who was supposed to come back quickly and who hadn't returned yet, was still the Son of God. And how do you prove that someone is the Son of God? It's not just through teachings, it's by miracles that show his divinity. And so these miracles were said to have been added in at a later point in time to help these early Christian communities believe and to focus on Jesus' divinity. Jefferson didn't find it necessary to believe in Jesus' virgin birth, divinity, or his pedigree as the Son of God to find value in the central teachings of Jesus' message of love. And this is a question for all of us. How necessary is it for us to believe, and for you Christians, that Jesus was born of a virgin, to believe that we should be kind to each other? How necessary is it for us to believe that he is the Son of God, or that he did these miracles, for us to find value in the message and the teachings that Jesus gave us? We should consider the fact that these teachings stand on their own. Also, Jefferson did not believe in the resurrection. He believed that Jesus died and was buried, the end. Keep in mind also, Muslims believe that Jesus also did not die on the cross, because Muslims believe that Jesus was a prophet and that God would not allow a prophet to die in such a terrible way. So Muslims believe that at the moment that Jesus was about to die, before he was going to give up his soul, that he was removed and that another body was placed on the cross that died. And Jesus was resurrected to heaven and will return at the end times to walk with Muhammad and the Mahdi at the end of times. So interesting how all of these stories weave in and out of each other. And now I'm going to chat with you about some of the interesting religious perspectives in the United States. The Shakers. The persecution that Puritans faced in England was a key factor driving them to the New World. As a matter of fact, the United Society of Believers in Christ's Second Appearing, that's a mouthful, they were called the Shakers, due to their trembling style of dance. When I see this, it automatically looks to me like it's the opening scene for Thriller video, right? They would shake. They were supposed to be shaking off their sins, shaking off all of the negative energy and the sinfulness. And so that's what they were called, the Shakers. The Shaker movement was founded by Mother Ann Lee, who traveled from England to America in 1774 to find a place for her sect to grow. The community believed, this sounds like a party, I know, celibacy, communal life, and confession of sin as their basic tenets, while also holding fast to the ideals of pacifism, equality of races and genders, and isolation from the world. A small but active Shaker community still exists today in Sabbath Day Lake in Maine. Voodoo. This is always an interesting one. People love the idea of voodoo. Synonymous with New Orleans, voodoo first came to Louisiana with enslaved West Africans who merged their religious rituals and practices with those of the Catholic population. So we see here now people from West Africa came, and they have these very different sorts of beliefs, but they were being converted by their slave masters to Catholicism. And so now we see the merging, the syncretism of these beliefs of Catholicism with these West African beliefs. New Orleans Voodoo is known as Voodoo Catholicism. It's connected to nature, spirits, and ancestors. And Voodoo was bolstered when Haitians fled from their country in 1781 and moved to New Orleans. The practice grew as people of color made it an important part of their culture. This was a religion that was unique to the African American culture. Voodoo queens and kings were spiritual and political figures in power in 1800s in New Orleans. The core belief of New Orleans voodoo is that God does not interfere in our daily lives. So there's a transcendent God, but this God doesn't answer our prayers. You can pray to God, but it's useless. That God is apart from us. But the spirits, ancestors, and other elements of nature will be able to interfere in our lives and interact with us. Connections with these spirits can be obtained through rituals, music, chanting, and of course through snakes. Today, voodoo dolls, many of you are familiar with voodoo dolls, potions, and talismans, are found in stores as a reminder of the vibrant voodoo history. And it is still alive today in New Orleans. You can go and find any number of voodoo practitioners throughout the city. It includes readings, spiritual baths, prayer, personal ceremonies. It's also used to cure anxiety, addiction, feelings of depression, and loneliness. It's a very community-based practice. Another religion, in 1830, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. So what are the core tenets of the faith? Joseph Smith founded the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, also known as the Mormon Church, after receiving several messages from the angel Moroni to restore God's church on earth according to church theology. These led him to discover gold plates near his New York home, which contained a uniquely American religious story, and later became known as the Book of Mormon. Never found those gold plates. Rising from the humble beginnings, the church has invested in extensive missionary efforts and now has 15 million members worldwide. It is a tremendously fast-growing faith on a global scale. Some of the core tenets are very interesting. Many of the concepts are laid out in the Articles of Faith. The key elements of faith include that God, the Father, the Son, and Jesus Christ, the Holy Spirit, belief in modern prophets, and continuing revelation. This is interesting. That it's not just that revelation is confined to the pages of history, that God is continuing to reveal himself to us today. Belief that through Christ's atonement, man may be saved by evidence and obedience to the laws of the gospel. Belief in the importance of repentance and baptism by immersion and the forgiveness of sins. Belief in the right of all people to worship God as they please. And belief that Jesus will return to earth and establish Zion, not in the Holy Land, but on the American continent. The Articles of Faith also affirm a belief in the Bible as the Word of God, but also it has to be correctly translated. So if it's not correctly translated, they do not agree with it. And the Book of Mormon as an equally important scriptural source. The text, which reads like the Old Testament, tells the story of the patriarch and prophet named Lehi. In roughly 600 BCE, before Common Era, Lehi was called by God to lead a group of Jews from Jerusalem to the New World, to the Americas. The group established themselves somewhere in North America. Now, they make no mention of how they arrived and that their pedigree and where they went after this, but at least some Native Americans descended from these immigrants, it said. And after Jesus' death, he appeared to these New World Jews and taught the Christian gospel to them. From this civilization, God continued to call forth prophets, including one named Mormon, the original author of the text that would be engraved on plates of gold that Joseph Smith unearthed in the late 1820s. Along with the plates, Smith also found a translation tool, which was also lost, that allowed him to read the engravings on the plates. Followers began to gather around Smith as he dictated his translation of the plates to scribes. And soon after, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints was founded, the Mormon Church. The church was different from other Christian churches because it was led by a living prophet and held sacred texts in addition to the Old and New Testaments. It was suggested that to attract and convert people to Christianity, the early church had used a number of pagan beliefs and practices to ingratiate the Christian religion to a new group of people. And this was called the Great Apostasy. The members of this new church believed that their new faith was the restoration of the New Testament church that had been destroyed during the Great Apostasy when they tried to make the Christian faith palatable to more people and to help grow the numbers of Christianity. Smith's followers believe that the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is the only true church. For example, you say, what is an apostasy? Do we know that Holy Week and Easter have been described as a substitute for the Jewish Passover to encourage participation among early Christians who were also Jews? So we put these two dates together and we get people to switch from now practicing the Passover to now practicing Holy Week and Easter. It's been long hypothesized that the Catholic Church selected December 25th as the birth date of Jesus to appropriate festivities held by the Roman sun god for the festival of Sol Invictus. This cult was established by the Emperor Aurelian in 274 Common Era. A scribe of the 12th century Syrian bishop wrote, "It was a custom of the pagans to celebrate on the same 25th of December the birthday of the sun, at which they kindled lights in token of the festivity. In these solemnities and revelries, the Christians also took part. Accordingly, when the doctors of the church perceived that the Christians had a leaning to this festival, they said that the true nativity should also be placed on this day." Hope I'm not breaking any hearts here. The plan of salvation for the Mormon church. There's a pre-earth life. When their preparation is complete, individuals spend time on earth. There's an earth life, gaining a physical body. They practice actively choosing between good and evil. And then Mormons believe that after death, the spirit leaves the body and moves towards waiting towards resurrection. It spends time in the spirit world. Here, the unfaithful are separated from the faithful, waiting for the end times. The plan of salvation teaches us that heaven is divided into 3 separate kingdoms of glory. These kingdoms are where all men and women will go after they are judged by God and are reunited with their immortal bodies. There's a celestial realm, the terrestrial realm, and the telestial realm for those who have actively rejected the Word of God. The Mormon temple is considered an earthly point of contact for this highest spiritual being, and Mormons believe that God is present in this temple space. The family unit is central to Mormonism, and the goal is the bonding ceremony that keeps all people together, a sealing ceremony, so that as you are alive, and we've all thought about this, gosh, I love my wife and my children, my parents. What happens to us when we die? Are we going to be together in the next life? The Mormons answer this by saying, we're going to bond you together in this life so that you will be present together in the next life. There's a baptism for the dead, so if there's someone who has passed and that person was not baptized in the faith and you want to be with this person in the next life, you can baptize this person even after they have been dead. There's an endowment ceremony. These are actually the undergarments that are worn by Mormons under their clothing once they are brought into the faith. Special marks are embroidered on these, and these are worn at all times, and are a sign of their commitment to their faith. Mormonism has been called a secretive faith, but church members will tell you it's not secretive, it's simply private, and therefore it's none of your business unless you're a member of the faith, and that's okay. Church finances are also kept confidential, provoking criticism that there's no way for church members or even outsiders to know where their money goes. Latter-day Saints can face excommunication if after being warned, they actually talk about matters of faith. The Seventh-day Adventist Church is another interesting American faith. This came out of the Millerite movement in the 1840s. They were prophesying the imminent second coming of Jesus Christ in 1840. It was formally established in 1863 in Michigan, and there are many teachings held by Seventh-day Adventists. The scriptures are infallible. Keep the Sabbath day. That God versus Satan is real, that there was and remains a constant battle between God and Lucifer. There's an investigative judgment that teaches us that judgment started when Christians in 1844, October 22nd to be exact, when Christ entered the holies of holies in the heavenly sanctuary. Judgment has continued ever since. So anyone who was born before October 22nd got a free pass. Dead tired. Death is just a state of unconscious sleep until the resurrection. The resurrection of the righteous will take place at the second coming of Jesus. Adventists reject the traditional doctrine of hell as a state of everlasting conscious torment. That's nice. They believe that the wicked will be permanently destroyed. So it's not that there's going to be a hellfire that's going to burn you for eternity. It's simply you're going to be annihilated if you are not a believer. Jehovah's Witnesses. Jehovah's Witnesses are a Christian denomination which is perhaps best known for door-to-door evangelization efforts. They began as a biblical study group and then began publishing the Watchtower, which led to the growth of the movement. Witnesses believe that they are living in the last days and that the kingdom of earth will come and it will be administered by 144,000 co-chairs. I'm guessing at this present moment there are more than 144,000 members of that faith, which has a lot of people walking on eggshells. Those who acknowledge Jehovah in this life will become members of the millennial kingdom. Those who reject them will not go to hell, but will face total extinction. New members are baptized by immersion and are expected to live by a strict code of personal conduct. Witnesses participate in the annual commemoration of Christ's death, and they share the bread, wine, symbols of Christ's body and blood. Only those thought to be among the 140,000 co-rulers eat and drink the bread and wine. The witnesses stress strict separation from secular government. They do abide by the laws, but there are some laws that they refuse to abide by. They will not perform military service, and they do not also participate in public elections. They also oppose certain medical procedures, particularly blood transfusions, although that is starting to change. The Church of Christ Scientist is another faith from the United States. Mary Baker Eddy taught with the Bible, the primary sources of teachings for the Church of Christ Scientist, that they should not seek out modern medical care. The church is known for its Christian Science reading rooms. We see these in almost every major city around the country. Pentecostalism is another interesting American Christian sect that came to us really through the African American community. It was largely adapted by the African American community as one of their core faiths. It traces back to 1901 when the students at a Bible school in Topeka, Kansas, concluded that speaking in tongues was a sign of baptism by the Holy Spirit. The official beginning of the movement was considered to be the Azusa Street Revival, led by William J. Seymour. Participants there worshiped, spoke in tongues, and said that there were miracles that were happening. And evangelical Pentecostalism has grown dramatically throughout the United States. A 2011 Pew survey showed that Pentecostal and other charismatic Christians make up a quarter of all Christians in the United States. The Church of Scientology. I wish I had more time to talk about the Church of Scientology. Truly, it is an intriguing faith and one to study the origins from marketing to the creation of an American faith. L. Ron Hubbard stated that his goal was to analyze humans' mental aberrations and to offer a means to overcome them. His views were originally scientific and not religious. In fact, until the 1950s, he held a largely negative view about religion. He eventually, though, moved away from Dianetics' focus and focused on the core approaches to Scientology, which opened in 1954 in Los Angeles. Scientology emphasizes that people should be free to enjoy religious expression, that mental healing is inherently religious, and that healing of the physical body is in the spiritual dimension. Scientology teaches us that people are immortal spiritual beings who have forgotten their true nature. One of the major tenets of Scientology is that we all have an immortal alien spiritual being, or thetan, that is trapped in our body, in our meat body. That's one of my favorite phrases, honestly, the meat body. The thetan has lived innumerable lives in the past and has lived in extraterrestrial cultures prior to arrival on Earth. Scientologists also believe that humans have hidden abilities with which proper guidance can be unlocked. The creation story is that in the primordial past, starting some 4 quadrillion years ago. So we have one group, the creationists, who believe that the Earth is 6,000 years, right? Science tells us it's about 4 billion. And now we have the Scientologists who tell us 4 quadrillion years ago. And Thetans applied their mental capacity to form the physical universe. There's an auditing process by which a person can unlock their engrams from the past, freeing themselves of their limiting effects and continuing to grow. And of course, there are courses that you can purchase through, I shouldn't say purchase because it's not a purchase. You make a donation and then you're able to participate in the course. But this is how it's allowed to be also a tax, it's held as a tax-exempt religion in the United States. They believe in reincarnation, and this I love. In every single church of Scientology, major church of Scientology, you will see an office set aside for L. Ron Hubbard, because when he returns, he was able to go to any one of the churches established around the world and have the exact desk and office that he wanted when he passed. It includes a plaque on the desk bearing his name, a pad of paper with a pen for him to continue writing his novels. So what's the future of religion? There are a growing number of Americans who consider them spiritual, but may not be religious in nature. So today we're seeing the growth of these large megachurches, Christian megachurches. Some of these churches have grown from small upstarts to auditoriums or stadium churches with expansive multimedia reach. The modern faithful now today preach the prosperity gospel, that it's okay to be wealthy, to do well for yourself, and to take care of yourself, and that this is in alignment with the gospel of Christ. That God is there for you, and that by thinking positively will result in financial and spiritual abundance. Where traditional religion often fails, these new churches are succeeding. They're experimenting with new ideas, constantly changing and adapting and drawing in people who have been really put off by the old church and the ideas of the older churches and their precepts. And mega churches across the nation, they've started constructing faiths of their own. This is modern syncretism. They are picking and choosing elements of faith that they want and that they believe are good for them and that make them feel good and that enable them to continue to come back and support this church. Internet faith movements are also happening. A 2010 survey said that more than 1,700 American adults revealed a link between time spent online and religious views, that the more a person spends online, the less that person will be affiliated with a religion. Respondents who spent more time online were less likely to be faithful or to take a pluralistic view of religion. The internet exposes people to a wide variety of beliefs, as does travel. That's why we're here, to experience and to change. The proliferation of internet access and the ease of access to this information is shaping the face of religion. People are exploring their own spirituality in new ways that we could have never imagined. And how could we have never imagined it? There's actually a faith called Jediism. May the Force be with you. The Jedi, introduced in the 1977 Star Wars, is a mystic power and a mystic energy that binds the universe. And so people are asked to purge fear and hate from their lives. The real world religion of Jedi comes with its own set of tenets and principles, a combination of Zen Buddhism, Taoism, and samurai culture. Again, a melding, a syncretism of faith. Jedi oppose torture and the death penalty and oppose prejudice and discrimination based on sexual orientation, gender, or identity. That there is a force in all living things. They also express self-determination and the freedom of expression. Hoods were generally required when walking around in public, but they found out in short order that wasn't such a good idea. Carrying a lightsaber is not required for obvious safety reasons. The U.S. Census doesn't count Judaism as a religion, but in England, it's the 7th largest religion with 175,000 members. 65,000 Jedi can be found in the Czech Republic, along with 65,000 Jedi in Australia. Judaism and the myriad of other religious movements may come and go, but perhaps the same could have been said about a small group of believers who gathered around an itinerant preacher some 2,000 years ago around the Sea of Galilee. What we believe and how we practice our faith will and should continue to change, reflecting our shifting values and social mores. And as we say, the truth keeps marching on. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Thank you all.